Welcome in, everyone. I'm your host, Gabe Yoakum, and this is Tradecraft. On the podcast, I talk to people who are incredibly good at what they do. And together, we take a deep dive into the distilled passion that makes successful people successful. Equal parts informative, interesting, and inspiring, we hope. We want you to walk away having learned something and feeling duly entertained. To that end, my guest today has been on the front lines of the pop culture convention industry for almost a decade and a half, starting with Emerald City Comic Con and Rose City Comic Con in the Pacific Northwest. Until recently, he was ReedPop's global director of content and celebrity talent, booking fan-favorite celebrity guests to appear at the largest pop culture conventions in the world, including New York Comic Con, C2E2, MCM Comic Con in London, and more. Todd Jones is a true jack of all trades, having experience as a criminal investigator, a radio DJ with stops in real estate and a video store or two along the way. Not unlike his spirit animal, Ron Swanson, he is a simple man who likes pretty dark-haired women and breakfast food. In full disclosure, Todd's a former coworker, a friend, and probably the most genuine human I've had the pleasure of being around. Todd Jones, welcome to Tradecraft.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this awesome podcast you got going.
Well, that has yet to be seen. That largely depends on how good a guest you are. So no pressure.
You've already got 5 stars from me, Gabe. Don't worry about it.
Well, there it is. See, I can pack it in now. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time. No, as is usually the case, I like to start at the beginning. And Todd, every time I think about Todd, I think about an old country music song. I used to work in country radio for about 7 years, and there's this old song called North to Alaska. Todd is the only person I've ever known that comes from Alaska. And every time we've never really discussed it at length, but, for us normies in the lower 48, what's it like growing up in Alaska?
North to Alaska. Oh, Johnny Horton, 1960. We're going way back to this one. Good movie too, John Wayne. Awesome. Alaska is interesting. I grew up there. My parents still live in Juneau, Alaska. It is a wonderful place to grow up, and because I didn't know any different, I don't think I felt sheltered in any way. Certainly not until I'd left Juneau did I realize how a little sheltered Alaska could be. But it was such a wonderful place to grow up. It was independent. It was a little bit free. The blessing and the curse about a place like Juneau is that it's down there in the southeast panhandle. So you can hike up over the mountains and through a couple glaciers and eventually hit Canada. But unless you are on a boat or on a plane, you're not getting out. There's no road access that gets you out of Juneau. You eventually reach the end of any road you're on, and you have to turn around and go back the other way. So there was a certain freedom to that. But like any other small town, there was the drawbacks too. You couldn't do anything outside the norm without at least 8 or 9 phone calls going to your mom's office, that kind of thing. But no, it's a great place. I don't get up there often enough anymore. I was lucky enough to get up there just after Christmas 2019, before the world shut down on anything, to celebrate my parents' 50th wedding anniversary and see the old homestead for a few extra days. But it's a good place. I like Alaska.
So I started working, high school jobs and that sort of thing when I was 14. My first job was at a Taco Bell. Worked at Taco Bell for 2 years. So what does a kid in high school in Juneau, Alaska do for work? What's the first job you ever took as a teenager?
First job I ever took. Aside from babysitting and odd jobs and lawn mowers and whatever else, and even that's not a big. Even mowing lawn wasn't a big thing in Juneau, but you could find odd jobs for a little bit of spare cash. But the nice thing about when I turned 14 back in the dark ages was that child labor laws weren't super strict, especially up in Alaska. So my first paying job, my first chore as a taxpayer was bagging groceries at the local supermarket. And that was, once you turned 14, you could work. And I worked there after school almost every day. And on the weekends, it was close to a 40-hour work week plus school, things like that. But did that. And after I was done with that, I got promoted or shifted or whatever over into the produce department for a little while. Worked there for almost a year, I think, until I left there. And then there's always plenty to do. I had lots of stuff going on in school, tons of extracurricular activities, tons of friends. I was in the bands, I was in the choirs, I was in all the stuff. So there's always performance stuff. Pep band was at the basketball games and all that. But my other big thing in high school was I ran a local video store there for 3 years, and even worked there in summers when I'd come home from college just to just to keep getting the free VHS rentals. For those of you who don't know what VHS tapes are, ask your parents. Um, but even that was fun. I've always been a pop culture nerd. As a true Generation X latchkey kid, I grew up, you know, coming home after school and fixing something to eat and sitting down in front of the TV and watching cartoons or just whatever was on, and that was just kind of my thing. So working in a video store was perfect because then I could just watch a lot of movies and rent a lot of movies, and it was good. But this was in the days when you could go and you could rent a Nintendo Entertainment System, and you would rent the VCR and all the things. I was working in video stores when the very first, and here's another trivia question for everybody: the very first uh, price to sell VHS cassette came out. Michael Keaton's 1989 Batman. So I've been a part of a few pieces of pop culture history here and there.
It's really fascinating to me. I On another of the episodes that I recorded of this show, we kind of go in depth into the how life used to be better, and one of the things we point at is the video store, and how that is just a cultural phenomenon and a memory that people just won't have anymore, which is a really
Mm-mm.
strange thing to think about. No musty smelling carpet, stale popcorn, standing in front of just an array of filthy, empty VHS boxes to try to figure out what you're going to do on Friday night. It isn't a memory that's going to exist any further. It's a
Well,
really
I mean,
fascinating thing.
Kevin Smith got it right in Clerks, though. I mean, you got Randall over there in the video store, and it is sometimes it's a really good customer service experience. It really was a good place to kind of hone some of those. Oh, see, you're into this kind of skills, right? Because you had the regular customers that would come in and they'd want to reserve tapes before they came in, and so you got a feel for tastes. I learned how to repair videotapes. Like I could take the cartridges apart, use little machines, cut them, tape them, like there's lots of stuff like that. But even then, it was fun because I was working there and I got some of my friends to go work there. And if it was really slow on some night, like whatever, we'd hook up a Nintendo and we'd just sit there at the front counter and just play Duck Hunt all night. Just or if nobody was in there, we'd throw in a movie that was above the PG-13 rating that the owner wouldn't let.
That's really cool. Yeah, no, I have very fond memories of Page's Home Theater in Westville, Indiana.
Ah,
I would walk because it's such a small town that I grew up in. I'd walk to the video store. My mom would give me $2.10. It's $2 to rent a movie, 10 cents in tax, 2.10. You go to the video store. Oftentimes, I'd end up just getting a video game, and she'd be mad at me. But yeah, no, it's some of the best childhood memories I have is walking over there and grabbing a tape. Um, eh, what took you out of Alaska? I assume you headed off to college. We all grew up. Um, what made you say, you know what? There's got to be more than this. Let's go try something else. What pushed you? Is it just because everybody goes to college and I got to do it, or did you want to kind of see the rest of the world?
I think there was some of that. It wasn't that the rest of the world was foreign, and I didn't go far. I didn't stay in Alaska to go to college, but I didn't go far. I went to Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington. I had family in that area, grandparents and an aunt and uncle, and cousins. So I chose the school both because I thought it could give me what I wanted academically. It wasn't a state school with a huge class load. It was small class sizes, things like that. It was a little expensive because it was a private school, but it also had me within half an hour of family, which is really kind of what I wanted. And I wasn't foreign to the Seattle area. We'd go down every summer to visit family, things like that. So So the lower 48 wasn't, well, at least that one state of the lower 48 wasn't a stranger to me. So it was a bit of a comfort level, but it was also a really good school and a good place to get an education. Um, that, however, that spread my wings just a little bit, and I actually um, finished out my fourth year at American University in Washington D.C. At the time, I was a pre-law major, and I pretty much finished all my coursework. Like I'd done up, but graduation wasn't until May. So I applied for the Washington semester program at American University, and which is basically a dedicated and consolidated semesters worth of courses in one subject. So I went back there and did it in criminal justice and did an internship as an investigator, as a criminal investigator at the Washington D.C. Public Defender Service, and at that point that was where this kid from Juneau, Alaska, got a little bit of shell shock. Being in DC, doing that kind of work in and around DC, um, but still at a time. I mean, this was 94, 95. So we're mid Clinton era. So place was hopping, things were starting to change, and so it was cool. And that actually, I went back to Seattle. I walked, got my degree, and then immediately went back. Did a little more investigation work in and around DC. Eventually found my way to a private investigation firm in suburban Maryland, and actually stayed in the Baltimore D.C. area for 2-3 years, just kind of scratching that itch. Like I needed to. I felt the best way to reward um, my childhood was to move as far away from it as humanly possible, I suppose.
I get
Um,
it.
but and that was a good thing too. I mean, I think that gave me the independence I was looking for. It was some neat experiences and a lot of things that I'll never forget. And then eventually found my way back to Seattle, and there you go.
I get it. Well, let me dig into that just a little bit. Why did you go that way? Why the criminal justice? Why investigations? Was it just always like something in the back of your head, like this would be really fun to do, so you just went for it?
I have
Or
always been I've always been a big fan of cop shows. So there's part of me that just always wanted to be a police officer, and I was very close a couple of times, and even that was a career shift. When I first went to college, I wanted to be a teacher. I was in the education track, but an unfortunate incident between a professor and we just could not find any common ground. Um, Long story, very very short, had me kind of shifted. I shifted majors, went over to pre-law, where I could, I don't know, argue with the teacher in class and have that be a good thing. So that and a little poli sci, a minor in sociology, and I'm like, okay, like I think I want to go into law enforcement, and I wasn't sure if that was going to be like local or federal or whatever, like FBI. I knew I didn't want to go to law school. Being a lawyer held no interest to me. Even as a way to get to another job, like just adding that extra degree and that extra amount of you know debt just didn't sit right with me.
right,
But once I was back east, I applied to, I think, every state, county, city police department back there. If not for the blizzard of '96, I could very well be retiring from the Baltimore Police Department right now. They were hiring, and they were not being discriminatory about what they were hiring. Um, and I had the written exam scheduled and all this different stuff. I had flown home to Juneau for the holidays and was flying back, and was caught in the blizzard of '96 and wound up spending a week at a friend's apartment in Minneapolis, um, and missed the test, and it did not get rescheduled, and that I just opted to pass on that opportunity. I got a little further with some other police departments, but for one reason or another, things just kind of didn't go my way, and I accept that now as grace. Um, but things could have been different. I could have been featured on The Wire at this point if I needed.
it's
But
it's really fascinating. You were telling the story, and I got goosebumps